Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the people who are working behind the scenes to make these kind of series happen. There's a lot of organization. If you've ever tried to organize anything, you know there's a lot of organization and quiet work that goes into organizing and putting together anything like this. So I don't even probably know all the different people, but I want to just start with an appreciation for everyone who's helped this come to fruition, and appreciation to all of you, because you're here on your lunch hour to learn something, and as a lifelong learner, I really respect that. So I usually walk around and kind of engage with the audience, but it sounds like I can't because it won't be recorded. Okay, I will stay put. Just pretend that I'm walking around, and really, especially the people in the back, I'm like with you. Okay, so we will see if this remote control actually works. Yay. So kind of a quick tentative map for today. I do want to give you one way of looking at restorative practices or restorative justice. There's many, many, many different lenses and ways of thinking about restorative. It's like a kaleidoscope, and you can look at it from lots of different perspectives. I also want to give you a taste of how I work with organizations when I'm in the schools, how I work with staff. You're not going to get a taste for how I work with children, because I'd modify that, but how I work with administrators and teachers. I also want to give you something that I find to be a really useful tool. This is a series on being nonviolent. And this tool, this little matrix that I want to share, is one of the tools I come back to over and over and over again in my own work, in my own parenting, in my own business. So you're all very busy. Your lives are probably stretching you in many, many different directions. That's how we all are these days. So I really want to give you a small gift that you could use starting this afternoon. And maybe at the end, and maybe not, just giving you a tiny overview of how I would work with an organization for like a whole year or a whole 3 year. So an overview of building a restorative system. So I don't want to talk about myself a lot because I want this to be about you, really. But just very briefly, I actually came to the conflict and restorative justice work through our family. So that's our family up there. We have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I was a director on campus. It was a mental health, the Psychological Services Center is a mental health center. So I had lots and lots of tools. I was doing social justice work, but we were having trouble with conflict in our own family with a young man who was 9 at the time. So I started looking for tools on how to work with kids who are bright but have spunk, have a lot, don't really care about rewards and punishments, don't really care about going with the program. Sometimes these kids are called defiant. And how to not lose connection with our son while still getting collaboration, cooperation in the family. So a lot of these tools, and what eventually became a clinic on campus, a conflict clinic, and eventually became so popular, and we had so many requests from local organizations that I was able to leave the university and start a full-time business, is this idea of how to work together around conflict, communication, and community building. But it began in our own family, and we still use restorative practices. We've continued to use them for the last 10 years. And one of the things that gives me is a ton of humility. So if you ever read a book about restorative justice or a pamphlet, I don't know if you ever have, but it sounds really pretty if you just do these 5 things. It will be all well, harm will be restored. But when you actually try to apply this to a real marriage of 20 years and a real 16-year-old, it gives you a lot of humility. So whatever you hear from me today, I just want you to know I think this stuff is really difficult. It's countercultural. It's innovative. It's on the edge. And whenever something's on the edge, we need a lot of support from each other to do it. If you like what you heard today, there's a lot of great, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of materials that hopefully you'll find to be great on our website, conflict180.com, copies of newsletters, free tools to use with children and with each other. And finally, I want you guys to know that it's going to sound, I don't want it to sound like I've created these ideas from scratch. I have tons of mentors and teachers in this work. Dominic Barter from Brazil, who was mentioned. Mickey Kashan, who does this work with organizations or corporations, and the teachers the teachers of the Urbana and Champaign schools are my most generous feedback givers. They, over the years, give me lots of generous feedback about this won't work here, and you don't know what it's really like on the ground, which I always take as a gift. So a lot of the work I learned from real people. So as a little warm-up, you don't have to do this. It's voluntary, but I'm just going to invite you to stretch. Somebody who's sitting next to you, somebody who's sitting behind you, if you're willing to do this little baby exercise, do not write a Wikipedia entry. Those of you who are professors, you know who you are. Just a quick sentence. Just say to your partner, what does restorative mean to you? And hint, there's no wrong answers. When there's a wrong answer, I want to tell you honestly, so you know you're going to be judged. But there's no wrong answers in this one. So just turn to your partner, your elbow partner, your back partner, your front partner, and say, what does restorative mean to you? Okay, so let's just wrap up, let the other person talk, if they haven't already. And of course, we could have an entire 40 minutes just on this, right? Because this is deep. So just from a couple of you, and apparently it'll be helpful if I say back what you're saying. What did you hear? So this is tricky. I didn't tell you, but this is a listening exercise. What did you hear that was interesting? Not what did you say that was interesting. What did you hear that was interesting and cool? Yes?
I like the word reconciliation, but also the fact that you try to do that reconciling before it becomes too blown out of proportion.
Thank you. So one way of thinking about restorative is we reconcile, but we try to do it before it becomes so stuck and so blown out of proportion that it's difficult to reconcile. Lovely. Something different. Yes? So very good. So restorative is also getting in front of the thing and preventing, I'm assuming you're thinking, harm or conflict from happening, not just reacting. Wonderful. Something different from that. Yes?
Coming back to an equilibrium?
Yes, so it's restore. So we're coming back to an equilibrium, coming back to how things were before, hopefully, if they were good. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. So we could spend 40 minutes doing this because this is a very rich concept and a rich word. And my impression is that all of this is correct. It's all right. It is about preventing harm. It is about reconciling after harm. It is about, all of these things. It's also about building community, some of you said that, and restoring relationships. It's about repairing harm. So if you had 17 different speakers here today, they would give you 17 different angles, and I think it's all good. So this is just one angle, and one angle that I find very helpful. What I don't believe restorative is it's not a method. So if you hear a lot about circles, restorative circles, and there's a lot of focus, or any kind of restorative justice meetings. Michelle Alexander just had a wonderful essay in the New York Times about, if you haven't seen, just lovely. She's the one who wrote The New Jim Crow, but she had a wonderful essay about restorative justice in the aftermath of violence, right? But circles are a method for getting to some of the things we'll talk about. An icebreaker is a method. I just had you do a little baby icebreaker. I hope that was somewhat pleasant. An icebreaker is a method. It has goals. Warm people up, get them to connect to each other, have them think and not just passively, receive input. But those are all methods. And to me, restorative is not a method, it is a way of being with each other. It's a way of being with others. And it could be applied, at least in my experience and in my life, to conflict and justice, which is one of the things you guys are thinking a lot about, but also to leadership, very broadly defined. When I say leadership, I mean you might be a leader in a church or mosque or synagogue committee. You might even be an unofficial leader because of how your personality is. You might be an official leader, an administrator. You might be I think I'm a leader in my family. I'm one of 2 co-leaders, even though our son, who's 16, sometimes thinks there's 3 co-leaders. I really think there are 2. You want to apply these principles to teamworks and meetings, to policies and practices, and of course to parenting, which I feel is kind of like all of the other boxes put together, conflict, leadership, teamwork, meetings, all of that is parenting. So when we talk today, that is how broadly I'm thinking that these restorative principles apply to our daily lives and how we are with each other. So I want to introduce you, this is the tool I'm talking about. It's one of my favorite tools. It's the one I come back to over and over again in my work, in my parenting, in my social committees, book clubs, whatever. It's the restorative matrix. It's modified from Wachtel and McColl's social discipline window. And it basically has 2 axes. I want to go over there, but then I know I'll be off camera. I'm going to go over there anyway. Because I want. Oh, then I can't talk to the thing. Never mind. Okay. You can tell I'm used to just walking around a big classroom. So, on the bottom, you have how much support and partnership you are giving to whomever you're with. And on the left is how high your expectations are for the person or people or group. So that winds us up with approximately 4 quadrants, right? So I don't know if you guys can see this in the back. Can people in the back see the little words there? No. I apologize. I will say what they are to you. So if you have if you set high bars with low support and partnership with people, have high expectations, set a high bar, but you give them very little partnership and support, that is sometimes called doing things to people. So I'm going to use real examples. There's many organizations I've worked with who want to invite parents and youth to be part of some kind of committee or group so their voices can be included. We're going to problem solve? I think I just made the font too small, and that's not their fault. Oh, thank you. Great. Okay. This will make sense, though. So in some of those cases, so if we were going to be in that quadrant, some groups invite the parents and youth to sit at the table. They have fairly high expectations for them. So in one group, the parents and youth were given a really big project to do. We would like you to restructure this, this way, the way we do intakes, so they are more family and youth friendly. Very little support or guidance, very little partnership. You know what you're doing, go for it. So that's just one example. An example from home would be if my son brings back a grade I'm not enjoying, which theoretically would never happen, of course. Yes, it happens all the time. So this quadrant would be, I don't really care about your excuses. I don't want to hear that you have ADD, whatever. Get it done, get the grade up. And I can give you millions of other examples, but it's a high expectation, kind of doing to. And I don't want you to get too hung up on the word righteous. I just wanted all the words to begin with the letter R. Okay? But it's just, don't worry about it, because in some ways you'll see that all the quadrants have a little bit of righteousness in them. But it's just a demanding style. If you have a low bar, you set a low bar, and you also have very little partnership and support, that would be the group of youth and families who are invited. And they're just paid to be there. And the bar is, they just need to show up. Nothing is expected of them. No support is given to them. The agenda is not explained. What's happening in the meetings isn't explained. They just need to show up. Low bar, low support. At home, this looks like Friday night or Thursday night. I'm so exhausted. Yes, you can have pizza. Yes, you can watch TV. I don't care if you do your homework. A kind of resigned, low bar, low support. If you do low bar, high support, which is a lot of times social workers, psychologists, and teachers who go into the profession to help, will sometimes slip into this quadrant. We're setting a pretty low bar. We're giving lots and lots of support. So this is where the parents and youth come to the meetings, and all the work is kind of done for them. They're a little bit tokenized. This is a real organization I worked with in a different state. Like, you guys, we've kind of thought about how you might want to vote. And, we looked into it, and we think that the person who would support families and youth the most would be this person, so you might want to vote for them. And also, we didn't want to make you work too hard, so we created the PowerPoint for you for your presentation to the state. But if you like, you can find a couple images. Would you like to find a couple images to add to the PowerPoint? Oh my gosh, you were so awesome at this. We're such good partners. Sometimes that's called rescuing. Sometimes that's called tokenizing. We've all been there. Okay, I can't speak for all of you. Most of us rotate around these quadrants all the time, which is less of an issue than we have a pattern. And then, of course, if you can manage to have high expectations or a high bar and also a high level of support and partnership. This is called doing things with people. So we have doing things to people, for people, not doing them at all, doing things with people. When it comes to conflict and justice, you can use the same 4 quadrants. Restorative justice is doing things with the people who were harmed. Victims often complain that the system leaves them out as much as it leaves out the perpetrators, that it does things to the victims. They never get to ask their questions. They never get an apology. They never get, regret or remorse. So we're doing things with people who've harmed and with the people who received the harm and with the people who were impacted. There's always all these other invisible people. So that applies to justice. It applies to parenting. It applies to how you would do a committee with youth and parents. Does that make sense? This applies, and so a lot of times, I love to come back to this when things are sliding at home or in my business, and oops, am I doing a little too much rescuing? So if a school asks me to come and say, can you do this circle with this very difficult kids, it's, what's easiest for me to do? Yes. Because I know how to do it, and it's going to be quick. I'm just going to facilitate the heck out of it. It's much more work for me to say, well, you've been trained. What support and partnership do you need to be able to do it? Do I need to sit in a circle with you? Do we need to go over the phone again, what you already know? Do we need to have a little talk about what you're afraid of? That's going to be more work for me, right? But that would be restorative. So when I slide in my business, I slide to rescuing. I slide to doing things for people. At home, I slide to resigned if I'm exhausted. Yes, just do whatever you want. It's fine. Yes, get yourself plugged in. Wonderful that you have iPads. That's the truth. It's not who I want to be. So does this make sense? There's a 4th little box here, which I'm calling reactive, and that's when your leadership style is kind of inconsistent. You're all over the place. You're just reacting. Sometimes you're kind of restorative. Sometimes your expectations are high. Sometimes they're low. Sometimes you're partnering. And that creates a very specific kind of atmosphere for your folks. So what I want to do now is have you think about this. Does this make sense? Yeah, totally. I also want to say that, of course, it's not like you're in one spot. This is a made-up grid that I made up. There is no scientific evidence for there being 25 points. I just totally made that up because that's how big my screen is. But theoretically, you could be anywhere on these, right? You could be like a 16, 7, you know what I mean? 16 expectations, 7 support. So you could be, in fact, I once did a project with some teachers where we actually plotted ourselves and some famous people. So Gandhi and Dr. King were way up there in the 24, 25. But if you read their autobiographies, which I have, even they slid way towards the middle when they were under high stress. So we all slide. So I want to explore this. If you were actually working in a school with me and we had a big floor, I would get you up here. We would actually get into the quadrants with our bodies, and it's really fun. But I have ascertained that that's not going to happen. So we're just going to keep doing this with our little, what are they called? Shoulder partners. That doesn't, your neighbor. Okay? So 2 little exercises with your neighbor, any neighbor you want to choose, if you want to get up and go to a different neighbor. The first one is for you to imagine, we're going to do this for work, just because we got to pick something. We could pick conflict. We're just going to pick work because many, many of us have worked in our life before, most of us. I want you to pick a place you have worked before and think about the pattern of leadership style. We all slide around from quadrant to quadrant, but usually the leader has a pattern: high expectation, low support, low, low, high, high, right? And I want it to be not the job you have right now. The reason is I don't actually want a live conflict right now that I need to facilitate. I'm just going to do a little exercise here. I can do a live conflict, but that would be a different talk. So you're thinking about a different job. If you have been at this job for 17 years, I don't care. Think about when you were a camp counselor. If you've never had another job in your life, which some of you look young, think about your family of origin. Think about your parents. So think about what the pattern was. What's the leadership style? And maybe if I go back, it's going to be a little bit bigger. Right? High, low, 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 high, high, low, high. More or less. Okay. So I'm going to start with the people who had a kind of demanding, harsh, high expectations, low support and partnership. You were in a group like that. You're not doing it, right? It's being done to you. So is anybody willing to say, thank you, what was the effect on the people after a while? What was the effect of being in that day in, day out? Yes?
Demoralizing.
Thank you very much. It was demoralizing. Why?
Because, you want me to do this, but you're not helping me to do it.
Yes.
I'm doing the best I can, but it's never satisfying.
It's never good enough. Yes. So at first, those folks tend to kind of like, especially if, you're trying your best. After a while, you're like, it's never good enough. So you were correct. The research shows that leadership style over time creates a demoralized workforce and a burnt out workforce. Absolutely. Yes?
How does empowerment fit in with that?
Yes. I mean, my understanding is that you will be more empowered in a high expectation, high partnership. So the little tweak to that is the expectations do not have to be the same for everybody. I don't want you to hear that. My high expectations for my 11-year-old daughter and my 16-year-old son are different, not even in maybe the ways you're thinking. So my high bar for them is different, and the amount of partnership they need is different. So in terms of empowerment, if you like that angle, does that resonate for you? That as you keep the high expectations but give enough partnership for somebody to get there, folks feel more empowered? Does that resonate for you?
Maybe. I think some people like autonomy.
Yes.
And so when I was in that upper left quadrant, I was kind of thinking autonomy might
Yes.
be that, which might be a good thing for
Oh, I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying that maybe one of the effects of high expectation, low partnership is that people become more independent. Yes. I don't know if I'd call that empowered per se, but certainly you're going to get a lot of autonomous folks who just try to go out and do it. So that can be, all of these have a positive and negative, absolutely. Yes, I misunderstood what you were saying. What's another effect of that group? Yes?
The situation I was in,
Yeah.
high expectations, there was no support, but there was a lot of looking over your shoulder.
Yes.
And so it wasn't empowering at all. You were diminished.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. So yes.
And the three biggest effects were, one, it drove people to tears. Number two, had a huge turnover rate. And number three, it had people always focused on the mood of the boss.
Oh, these are beautiful insights. And then they don't contradict each other, by the way, because all of this could be happening while we're autonomous. So what I love is you can get a group of people together, and in about 15 minutes, they replicate, a $1 million study for free. Because you guys are completely right on. Yes, teams with that kind of leadership have a lot of competition. They tend to compete with each other. They tend to have more conflict, ironically. And yes, and we see this in classrooms sometimes. I come into a classroom, and everybody's geared towards the teacher. They want to please the teacher. And they're not nice to each other. They're not a team, but they're very nice to her or him. So absolutely, all of this is true. Tears, you're going to see, the other thing you're going to see in that team over time is somatic stuff. You're going to see health problems. Because people are trying hard, but you're going to start to see migraines, physical illnesses, a lot of sick days. So you guys get this. And we're not going to spend quite as much time on the other three. This is normally a 90-minute presentation when I do this in the school, so I'm just giving you a taste. What happened to the people who were in the low? Low expectations, low partnership. What was the effect? What was the product like or the service? What was happening to the people? Anybody in here had that? And is also willing to speak up, which is no wrong answers. Yes? Yes. You get a lot of discouragement. I mean, you said it perfectly, I'm not trying anymore. You get a lot of sort of in low efficacy, disempowerment, like why bother? And the product is going to be after a while. Yes?
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yes.
People get kind of lackadaisical about what they're
Yes, you are going to see. Now, some people are just going to do their thing because of who they are, but for the most part, as a pattern, you're going to see lackadaisical. And it's not because they're shirking, it's because why? Why bother? Yes. What about how people are as a team? Do you remember, do you think about? So the righteous quadrant kind of creates conflict and competition. What does this one create? Apathy. I love that. It's a perfect way of saying that. So people sometimes are kind of together in it, complaining about the boss, complaining about the product, complaining about everything, but they're not very solution focused. Yeah. And sometimes they're not very together. It creates actually surprisingly depressed people. You think, oh, you could do whatever you want. What a perfect job, and you're still getting paid. Like those families, those parents and youth who were just paid to come to the meetings. But actually, it creates depression. Because people actually want to contribute. Most humans want to contribute. All right. Rescuing, which many of us in the helping professions tend to slide into. What happens if we start to do things for people? What happens to the people? I love that you're engaged. Can I see if anybody else wants to answer? Is that okay? Yes. Anybody who hasn't spoken? You see, there's no wrong answers. Yes. Oh. Yes. Yes, you're going to get very unmotivated folks, and folks who actually over time don't even believe they can do it. At first they might, but over time, if I keep doing the PowerPoint for you, and actually, ironically, you will actually then become less effective at doing PowerPoints. And what were you going to say? Was it something different?
Just helplessness.
Helplessness, yes. Now, what's interesting is that people will often tell you they like being in this quadrant. You will have the experience of people saying to you, just please, just do it for me. I don't know, can you decide for me? So it's complicated because it feels like people are saying, please do it for me. Our son who's grown up, I'm sorry I'm talking about my son so much, sometimes people are like, you have a daughter? Because he's the one who's challenging us to do this. Oh. Our son, who's grown up sort of having circles and dialogues and restorative practices at home, said the other day, can you just punish me instead of having the dialogue? The dialogue is a punishment. You know, dialogue is hard, and you have to take responsibility. You have to talk about how you hurt your sister. Then they're asked to come up with like the things to repair the harm, and he's like, just punish me. Just take my computer away. Just do something to me. So we often get this kind of mixed message from people. I don't care, just do it for me. And we don't have time to get into all that, but I want you to think about that. Because you all told me, well, you all didn't tell me, but several of you said demoralization, disempowerment, ineffectiveness. So if people feel that way, why are we getting there, right? So just think about that. We don't have time today, but it's very interesting. And then the reactive, what do you get from that kind of style where people are just swinging from being super restorative, super harsh? They don't care. What happens to folks who live in that kind of team or that kind of family? What are the effects? Yeah?
Anxiety.
Very good. We get anxiety and fear. So if you see folks who are living in that kind of place, they're kind of like very cautious. They're like watching the weather map. A little bit like, this is an exaggeration, but a little bit like alcoholic families, where you don't know what's going to happen. But a little bit, not all the way. So you're going to get people who are not going out on the limb, who are just kind of, I'm staying in my lane, I'm staying in my lane. You hear that a lot. And it doesn't make sense to you. Why? Because you don't know what you're going to get. You might get smacked for showing initiative, or you might get, I don't care, just figure it out. Or what the heck is this? You call this a report? And so people are going to be sort of fearful and cautious. So this makes sense to you. You guys know this in your bodies. Okay. So the second piece, and again, we don't have time to get up in the room, and it's kind of fun, but you're going to think about yourself now. Not at your best, and I'm not going to make you raise your hand and say if at your best you are a restorative person or not. Because I believe that just by being in this series, you kind of want to be in that quadrant. Is that true? Yeah, like you're in a series about nonviolence. I mean, you don't want to be a dictator. So we all want to be in that quadrant, but we slide around. I slide around, and I would teach this work. So let's think about it. When you are under high stress and low capacity, your capacity is very low, and you know why. You know what I'm talking about. You don't have it in you. But also stress is high. Think to yourself, where do I tend to slide? And I know it's probably going to be different for you at work, home, church, so that's okay. Let's think about work for now, because that gives us a framework. Because remember, at home I slide to kind of resigned, but at work I tend to slide to rescuing. And actually what's interesting is when I was a director on campus, I slid to righteousness under stress. Okay, you people, we have this thing done, due tomorrow, we're all staying till 9 o'clock, I will order pizza. Oh, I'm sorry, you have a date? Oh, well, you're not on the clock, are you? You happen to pick a cell. And maybe I wasn't so sarcastic, but that was kind of the idea, right? So if I was really pushed, I'd slide to righteousness. So where do you slide to? Just think about it to yourself. Oh, speaking of sliding. Okay, so this one is a little bit more vulnerable, so you don't have to talk to your elbow partner, but it's kind of cool to do it. You can divulge as little as you want to feel safe. Tell your elbow partner what gets you there, what makes you slide, what triggers you or makes you slide to that quadrant. Think of a specific example. Right, in the example I just gave, that was a deadline that was imposed by my boss. So think, what makes you slide, and share it with each other back and forth. If you're willing, or you can take notes in your phone. Okay, so let's wrap up. And I know I'm just giving you a little baby taste because we don't have 90 minutes together. But this could be a fun activity to go and do and talk about with your partner or your grown child or at work. What makes us slide? So what are some things that you heard Or you can share your own. What makes people slide, and where are you sliding? If you're willing to share out. Yes?
Well, what I discovered myself is that internally, I slid towards judgmental, but in terms of my behavior, I slid toward rescue.
Okay, so when you judge yourself harshly,
Not
no.
myself, others.
Oh, sure, yes. So you're judging that they can't do it. They're not up to the task?
Or they should do it.
They should do it.
Not doing
They're not doing it. So exactly.
it. So instead of dealing with
Yes, we just do it.
the rescue,
So it's very great insight. One of the reasons we go to rescue is because we're frustrated that somebody isn't meeting our high expectations. This is also the beginning, by the way, of contempt. I do a whole thing on contempt, which is really interesting. That's the beginning of contempt, somebody not meeting our high expectations. But we also don't have the energy or time, or we didn't plan, because you said low capacity, high stress. So one of the things that's really important that you're saying that I feel like is not talked about in the restorative justice world is that it takes more work to be in the restorative quadrant. It's not less work. Of course it's less work for me to do the PowerPoint for you than to partner with you. Our son recently got his bike locked up at the high school, and his lock stopped working. And we were like trying to partner with him to do this. Like, we're like, you'll need to look it up on Google first, or go to your principal, see what happens in these cases. I don't want to. Well, what kind of support do you need? Okay, he found out that you need to call the non-emergency police number. I don't want to call them, it's embarrassing. Okay, what kind of support, right? I'm telling you, we spend so much time partnering with him that I could have just called the police 15 times myself and given them the location. Then he wound up being shy and filling out a comment form on their website, which was the wrong comment form. So he went to the non-emergency. So yes, and that's just one tiny little thing to get one bike rescued. Yes, it's much easier. Let's remember this. It is easier to be in rescuing or doing it too. And that is why this is countercultural. One of our mentors, Dominic Bardner, says, if you're going to do this work, any countercultural work, you need lavish support. Lavish. Because otherwise you will slide back to your regular quadrant. Beautiful. Something different than frustration, yeah.
For me, it was my ego.
Mm.
So, righteous.
Yep.
I know how to do it right. Why can't you?
Yes.
It's very judgmental.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is about expectations, which is built into the model. So one of the things you want to start thinking about is what kind of expectations are we setting? One of the ways I actually love to use this matrix actually is on myself, because if we cannot be restorative with ourselves, it's very hard to be restorative with others. So I, for instance, since I started my business, have had a really hard time exercising. Like regular yoga, regular biking, regular anything. And I tried all the tricks, setting my alarm early, sleeping in my exercise clothes, whatever, right? Nothing was working. So normally what I would go to is righteous. You should know better than this. I know you have time somewhere. If you can run a business, you can figure out how to exercise for 15 minutes. But instead, you can go to the restorative quadrant and say, what support and partnership do you need to reach your high goal of exercising? Because you can also just drop the goal. Oh, never mind, I'll just exercise once a week. It's not fair, I'm a businesswoman. But if I want to keep the goal high, because it does prevent dementia, among other things, so it's very important. What support and partnership do I need to get there? And then I was like, oh my gosh, the one time I always stick to my exercise is when I'm doing it with other people. So I need an accountability buddy. I went online. It turns out there is a group for beginning running ladies that starts in March, for people who don't run. And they'll do it with you in Meadowbrook for $40. Yay! Right? But if I don't ask the question of what support and partnership do I need, then I'm sliding in these quadrants against myself as well. Yes?
I know there are probably some confidentiality, but I'm wondering if you can characterize or say something about your experience working at the Urbana schools.
Experience working with the Urbana schools, meaning what kind of workshops I do, or?
I'm not sure. I just understood that you had some activity there.
Yeah. So I'm working with teachers This would be a typical beginner workshop that I would do. We'd start with the restorative matrix. We'd talk about how difficult it is to stay restorative with our classes. We would talk about what supports and partnership do we need to stay more restorative. We'd eventually move into, and I'll show you the wheel, actually, this is a good time because our time is almost up. You guys can't even see this from here, that's totally okay, but there's like 12 slices in there. You guys are in the first slice. The next one is how to give effective feedback, restoratively in a partnering way. How do we make effective restorative requests instead of just demanding things? Icebreakers. One of the things we talk about, that's my alarm to remind me, nobody panic, just so I don't get too excited and have you guys go over. Team building among staff. So one of the things we talk about is that the U.S. Army, anybody here from the military? Yeah. Apparently, I'm told the U.S. Army does the most percentage of team building exercise of any organization in the U.S. Why is that? Well, it's fine if we don't support the Army, but they spend a huge percentage of time doing team building because they have to work together. Well, we all have to work together. Why is it more important for the military? Why are they willing to invest all that time into team building? Because there's lives at stakes. So one of the things we talk to teachers about is the stakes are high. Since when have our kids become solo stakes that we don't have to team build anymore? So we do, this is, right, so I go through the whole wheel and it takes years. It takes years because this is a mind shift and it's countercultural. So if I work with a school, if I work with a program, we just begin and we build together. And somewhere in there, we get to courageous conversations. We get to circles, we get to conflict, but we don't begin with conflict. I used to do that years ago because people aren't ready. We begin with exactly how you guys began, thinking about your leadership and how you make decisions. Yes? You have a question in the back? Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Just a few things, and I'm
Yes.
going to just mention, because I've talked to you in the past.
Yes.
But now I'm going to have to change, because you said it takes years.
Yes.
It shouldn't take years. We have a mess in the Urbana schools. So my question to you is, what has been done? Because in the last couple of months, it's been utter chaos in the Urbana schools. So your organization or your job, what is it doing to fix? I hear what we're saying as far as we got to give your, what are we doing to fix what's going on in the Urbana schools, other than paying parents? I don't think they should be paid to do things. I mean, I'm a product of the Ellis Drive 6, the integration of the schools 50 years ago. It took them less than a year to integrate the schools, working with the board and stuff. It shouldn't take years to fix this. So my question to you today is, what's being done to fix with your organization, the portion that you do in the Urbana schools? It shouldn't take years. We don't have years.
Yeah.
Nobody's sitting in the lab. Or teachers, they're leaving too.
So let me reflect first what I'm hearing before I answer. Is that okay? You're talking about the urgency that we feel when something is on fire.
No, I'm
No.
asking, what is your organization doing?
Right.
To fix or to restore or to replenish or whatever phrase you want to use. What are you doing now in the Urbana schools to fix what we see there, even a portion of it?
Right. And also, you're also saying like things are too urgent to wait a long time. We need something quickly. Right. So I totally feel that. I just want to say I feel that conundrum, that it takes years to create a mind shift in restorative leadership, while also things are happening that are scary to us. So I can answer your question, and it is yet still my experience that this kind of mind shift takes years. Any kind of big innovation in the healthcare system and the educational system. So I just want to say that first.
Okay, I was going to say this. That's not the issue. The issue
Yeah.
for me right now is, what is your organization doing?
So my organization began working 5 years ago with the middle school and the high school. And we have a PowerPoint that we presented to the board, which got completely lost, and our data in the February meeting when the restructuring was announced. That was literally the same meeting in which we presented our PowerPoint. So that's available. We were starting to see some really cool small effects. with teachers and kids. During the restructuring time, our organization was, the focus of Conflict 180 was moved to the elementary schools. So I have not worked with the middle school and high school now for about a year because other people were hired who also have restorative justice training. And they're at the helm of those now. So our team was shifted. We're now working with Wiley, Dr. Williams, and Yankee Ridge. So,
But you're doing what? I guess maybe I'm not answering
yes.
my question.
So we're doing workshops with
They
it.
kicked out of the elementary schools too. The issues in the elementary schools. So I'm
Yeah.
asking, what can you tell me that you're doing? We're doing X, Y, Z.
We're doing,
I know that you're working with. I know that you're working with them. What?
okay, so
One thing.
we're doing 3 things. One is professional development for teachers. So this kind of, what? Yeah, so we're doing, how do you handle a classroom conflict or a playground conflict? Here's how you do a circle. That's one method. Second thing we're doing is we're helping teachers who have conflicts with each other have restorative circles and dialogues. Because, like we're saying about the military, we need to have strong teams. So some of the teams and staff need support in handling their own conflicts more restoratively. So that's living the work. So we're living it and not just doing it to children. And then the third thing is also supporting dialogues at the district level at times. And those are often private and confidential, so people have asked us to create dialogues and circles with staff, but haven't chosen to, report out. So is that helpful?
It's very helpful.
Yes. So PD,
Board meeting next week.
yeah. PD,
Yeah, 'cause some of the things that I hear you saying, the union should be taking care of IEA, teacher conflicts and stuff. We're talking about our young people. That's why I thought this was restorative justice. For helping the young, the kids, the parents. So I'm hearing that it's all about the teachers, and I think that's one of the issues.
and I'm also now running 3 groups with children. So that's something newish. And I know that UMS actually has a leadership group where kids are learning conflict as well. So yeah, and I hear that it's kind of weird. Why would you work with teachers? It's my experience that until you get this and you're restorative, it's very hard to be restorative with kids. So, and I'm also happy to stay for 30 minutes after. So I don't know if you have a few more minutes that we could also take that. Okay. Yes.
Following that, where, in the best of all possible worlds, what could you, where would you go, what would you do right now? If you had everything you could have,
In the best of all possible worlds, what would I do right now?
to help the middle school and high school?
How would I help the middle school and high school? So our team is not in the middle school and high school, and there's some really talented and, amazing people who are doing the work there now. So,
Do you think everything's where it should be?
I mean, things are never, perfect. I have kids at both schools, actually, ironically, because I have a 6th grader and an 11th grader. They're very happy and they're thriving, and I understand that we have a lot of complaints and that there are, issues that have been brought up. So to me, this is the way you do it. You start having dialogue among the adults, and we work together with each other to solve it, versus kind of doing things to each other, becoming resigned and giving up, right? So if I'm working with somebody, which I'm not in that building right now, but I'm in others, we try to move the staff and the kids into the restorative quadrant. And we ask what supportive partnership would they need. So I don't come in like a white knight on a horse, because that's doing things 2 people or 4 people. So for instance, in elementary schools, which our contract began in August, a lot of that work is getting the teachers to trust our team and doing team building with them, because they don't just trust them outside, right? So a lot of the work in the fall is coming to classrooms and getting buy-in and trust. So if I were to work in those schools, that's the first step. Who's doing what? How do we build on that? How do we collaborate? Because that's restorative. I mean, it's like I kind of have to live the work, you live the work to do the work. And coming in and giving somebody something to do, would be in the 2. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I will be here to, if people are really, that's where the energy is talking about the local work, I'm super happy to do that. I wanted to give you something you can actually start doing and thinking about this afternoon. If you have one more minute, I think it's always nice to end with harvesting. So if you could turn to your elbow partner and just tell them one thing you're taking away from this today, I find that helpful as a kind of summary for myself, if you're willing.
I don't know how I'm going to edit this for radio, so I'm wondering if you have any other addresses that are recorded or available somewhere? Is there a link to your, on your?
I mean, I've done several,
What's the business page? that you actually-
conflict180.com.
Oh, okay, all right, I
So
saw
I've done
that.
several things with Sherry Williamson, which,
Conversation?
and in fact, one of them was with Don.
So I'm looking for something to
Yeah,
fill
like that's
in
not a
the
workshop.
poorly recorded audio from this and insert something.
Is it because I wasn't talking to the mic?
No, it's just because we don't have a crowd
Oh.
tonight, so
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the stuff that they contributed would be very hard to
Yeah.
get to. So.
While you're visiting and before Elaine breaks to a more informal style and is happy to talk with people, I just want to not be remiss and announce that there are still some tickets available for the Wise International Dinner, which is this Sunday night. There aren't tons of tickets available, but there are still some tickets available. So if you would like to come to the International Dinner, it's a favorite community event. There's awesome food, great entertainment, and it's really kind of a moment where we come together at the Y to celebrate our community, particularly to celebrate the recent immigrant parts of our community, and it's lovely. It's a lot of fun. So it's a favorite event. If you don't have your tickets yet, please get them at the front desk. Thanks. You can also get them online if you prefer to do that, if there are still some left.
Okay, thank you guys for your engagement, everybody who answered questions and talked to their elbow partners, and hopefully you have a little tool you can start playing with right now to be more restorative in your own life.